Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex source material curriculum blueprints, detailed regulatory summaries, and expert notes. And, well, we try to extract the actionable intelligence you need to stay ahead.
That's the goal.
Today, we are diving deep into a domain that I think a lot of people see as the most administrative, maybe even the driest part of security.
Oh, for sure.
But it's also the most fundamental. We're talking about governance, risk, and compliance. GRC.
It really is the blueprint, isn't it? It's the strategic framework. It's that non-technical engine that dictates the why and the how for every single technical control we put in place.
From a firewall rule to an encryption standard?
Exactly. I mean, if you think of cybersecurity as a physical body, the networks, the servers, the endpoints, then GRC is the brain.
I like that analogy.
It establishes those high-level principles, makes sure we're meeting these incredibly complex regulatory mandates, and it provides the essential scaffolding for consistent top-down risk management.
So without strong GRC, what happens?
Well, without it, all your technical security efforts, they just become fragmented, they're unsustainable, and this is the big one, they often fail regulatory audits.
Absolutely. Our source material today, it's drawn from these really comprehensive student guides and specialized study notes. It basically gives us a masterclass on how organizations formalize security. So our mission here isn't just to define GRC, it's to give you the fundamental understanding of what we're calling the GRC triad. So what structures mandate security, and what documents actually define it.
Right. It's not enough to know that a control exists.
Exactly. We want you to understand the exact hierarchical and, frankly, the legal reasons for why it's shaped the way it is.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the very foundation of security policy.
Let's do it. The hierarchy of administrative controls.
Right. So when we talk about administrative controls, what we're really addressing is the management of, let's say, human and operational risk.
The people problem.
The people problem. Always. These are the non-technical directives, the rules designed to regulate the behavior and expectations of everyone in the company. They're the foundation that underpins all the technical stuff.
Okay, so our sources break this down into 4 tiers.
Yep, 4 distinct tiers. And it moves from this really high-level, almost philosophical intent, all the way down to the specific day-to-day actions someone takes at their desk.
So let's start at the absolute top. The cornerstones. We're talking about policies.
The foundational documents, these are broad, they're definitive, and they are authoritative.
Which means they are mandatory. You have to follow them.
Absolutely required.
Right.
A policy sets up that high-level intent, the expectations, the goals, and, the core beliefs of the organization when it comes to security.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Think of a policy as a kind of mission statement for a specific area of security. So a policy might simply state, all sensitive data must be secured, both in transit and at rest.
That's it. It's that simple.
That's it. It's the non-negotiable organizational stance. And because policies are so high level, they typically need approval from the very top. We're talking C-suite, sometimes even the board of directors.
Wow.
Yeah, because it has to reflect the company's legal and ethical posture. It's not about the technical nuts and bolts. It's about the overarching principle. Okay,
so the policy tells us what has to be done. Secure the data, but it's, like you said, intentionally vague on the how. So if a policy says, use strong encryption, how does a developer or an engineer know what strong actually means? Is a simple rotating key strong enough? Or do they need something state-of-the-art?
And that's the perfect question. That lack of specificity is exactly where the second tier standards becomes absolutely necessary.
This is where we get specific.
Standards are critical because they define the minimum acceptable levels of compliance. They give you those specific mandatory requirements for how you implement the technology.
So they put some teeth into the policy.
They put the teeth in, yeah. They define the precise parameters that the high-level policy has to operate within. This is how that vague statement becomes something you can actually measure and audit against.
I love the definition I saw in the source notes here. It says standards help define what great looks like.
Or at least what minimum acceptable looks like.
Right. At the very least. So instead of just saying data must be encrypted, the corresponding standard would mandate something very specific.
Like what?
Like all data classified as PII, personally identifiable information, must be encrypted using AES 2006.
There it is. Specific, measurable, and you can directly enforce it. There's no ambiguity.
And that level of detail, it's not just pulled out of thin air, is it? It's often heavily influenced by the outside world.
Profoundly influenced. Let's take the payment card industry data security standard, PCI DSS,
A big one.
a huge one. If your organization handles credit card data, even one transaction, PCI DSS directly shapes the content and the specificity of your internal policies and standards. The sources remind us that it's built around 6 key security goals.
And those goals then translate directly into your internal mandatory standards.
They have to.
I think we really need to detail those 6 goals because just saying TCI DSS doesn't really convey the weight of it. These are massive drivers of internal security spend and process.
You're absolutely right. It's worth unpacking. So the first goal is build and maintain a secure network and systems.
Which means things like firewalls and not using default passwords.
Exactly. Don't use admin. The second is protect stored cardholder data. This is where your AES 256 standard comes directly into play. It also covers things like data retention and masking.
Got it. What's number 3?
Maintain a vulnerability management program. This is a big one. It requires you to protect systems from malware, regularly update your antivirus, and crucially, make sure security patches are applied in a timely manner.
Patching. The bane of every admin's existence.
But a mandatory one. Number 4 is implement strong access control measures. Basically, need-to-know access, restrict access to cardholder data, give everyone unique IDs, and physically secure your servers.
Okay, 2 more.
Number 5, regularly monitor and test networks. You can't protect what you can't see, so this means constant testing of your security systems and processes.
And the last one feels a bit meta.
It is. Number 6 is maintain an information security policy. It mandates the GRC structure itself. It forces you to have the policies and ensure that everyone knows what their responsibilities are.
So to bring it full circle, an internal standard that mandates all your databases must use AES 256 encryption is directly satisfying goal 2 of PCI DSS.
Precisely.
And a standard that mandates monthly patch cycles is meeting goal 3. It's a direct line from an external mandate to an internal technical requirement.
Exactly. So now we've got the big, that's the policy. And we have the specific, mandatory, measurable, must use. That's the standard. But how do you get 10,000 employees spread across multiple continents to actually execute those mandates consistently in their daily jobs?
Yeah, that's the real challenge.
And that's the work of the third tier. Procedures.
These are the blueprints, the step-by-step instructions.
That's a perfect way to put it. They are the detailed, actionable instructions that translate that high-level intent and that specific standard into consistent, repeatable daily operations. They ensure uniformity, and they are also mandatory.
And the value here seems massive.
It can't be overstated. Procedures are the most effective tool you have to ensure consistency. They get rid of all the ambiguity by outlining the precise sequence of actions an employee needs to take.
Like an incident response plan.
A perfect example. Step 1, isolate the affected machine from the network. Step 2, notify the incident management team using encrypted channel X. Step 3, document the time and your initial findings in ticket Y.
And without that explicit blueprint,
it's chaos. Every technician handles the same type of breach a different way. You get inconsistency, you lose evidence, and it's a nightmare for auditors and regulators.
You know, this brings up an interesting point from the sources. The risk of these procedures becoming obsolete.
Oh, absolutely.
In a fast-moving IT world, a procedure can get outdated really quickly. If your procedure says to use a specific tool for a firewall change, but that tool is now deprecated and insecure,
then following the procedure actually introduces risk.
Exactly. Even though the overall policy, maintain network integrity, is still valid.
It's a fantastic point. And it's why change management procedures are themselves so critical. You need a procedure for updating your procedures to make sure the blueprints keep pace with the architecture.
Okay, so policies, standards, and procedures are all mandatory. They're all very precise. But what if an organization just wants to offer, some helpful advice, best practices that aren't strict mandates?
That brings us to our 4th and final tier, guidelines.
And the key word here is optional.
Non-mandatory. That's the key differentiator. If an employee deviates from a policy, a standard, or a procedure, that's a compliance violation. You're in trouble.
But if they deviate from a guideline,
it's usually fine as long as they still meet the baseline requirements set by the standard.
I see. So guidelines allow for some flexibility.
Right. They let organizations tailor their approach without the rigidity of a mandatory control. For instance, a policy might mandate multi-factor authentication, MFA.
Okay.
A standard might mandate the type of MFA you have to use, like TOTP or biometrics.
Got it.
But the guideline might just offer suggestions on the preferred complexity of your secondary password or the best way to time the refresh of your MFA token. They're just helpful advice. They steer you towards success, but they don't carry the weight of a compliance mandate.
Okay, so let's try to sum this up. The key takeaway here is that policies establish the moral and legal ground.
Right, the why.
Standards establish the technical minimum for that ground, the what.
Measurable what, yeah.
Procedures ensure the consistent execution of that minimum, the how.
The step-by-step how.
And guidelines offer optional advice for exceeding that minimum. And all four of these things are considered administrative controls because they're all about regulating human behavior and managing operational risks.
You've got it. That's the hierarchy.
Right. So having those documents, the policies, the standards, it's all well and good, but they're just paper, right? Unless there's executive buy-in and a clear functional organizational structure behind them.
And that's the perfect transition to the operational side of governance. This all starts with one thing: management commitment.
This is where the rubber really meets the road. If the CEO and the senior leadership team don't actively care about security, then everything else just crumbles.
It's precisely that. The source material is, well, it's adamant about this. Management's active support is you just can't do without it. It's the key to program effectiveness.
So what happens when that support isn't there, when it's not visible?
Well, without that visible and vocal endorsement from the top, all of your security practices, especially the resource-intensive stuff like continuous training or just keeping the GRC documentation updated, they're quickly seen by staff as unimportant.
Just compliance checkbox formalities.
Exactly. Something to get through so you can get back to your real job.
And what's the tangible impact of that kind of neglect?
It's huge. If the C-suite treats the annual security awareness training like an inconvenience they have to click through,
Then every other employee will too.
of course. That management endorsement is what secures the budget. It ensures staff actually participates, it allocates the necessary time, and it's not just about money for ongoing things like developing new training content to keep up with new threats.
So a strong management commitment. It fosters a better security culture.
It creates a resilient culture where security is seen as a collective responsibility, not just some task for the IT department to handle.
You know, it's interesting because many regulations now are starting to explicitly mandate this.
They are. It's not just a best practice anymore. Many regulations require that the leadership team, the board, they have to receive regular reports on the organization's risk profile and security posture. It forces them to maintain that oversight.
And that, in turn, guarantees that resources flow to the most critical areas.
It has to.
Okay, so to manage that commitment and assign accountability, especially in really complex environments like, say, a global incident response or a huge cloud migration, organizations need a tool to make roles crystal clear.
And this is where we bring in the RACI matrix.
RACI.
The RACI matrix is it's a brilliant and really straightforward organizational tool. It stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
And it's used to define and clarify who does what.
Exactly. Who does what in complex tasks, especially big security initiatives like risk assessments, patching schedules, or major system upgrades. It just clears up the confusion.
You know, a key finding in the notes that really stood out to me was just how critical the distinction is between the R and the A, responsible and accountable.
It's the absolute core of RCI, and it's where most people get it wrong.
So let's break that down.
Okay. Responsible R refers to the person or the team who is directly in charge of executing the task. They are the doers. They do the work. They meet the deadlines.
So if the task is patching 1,000 servers, the operations team members are the ones who are responsible.
Precisely. They are performing the hands-on activity.
But the accountable A person is different.
Very different. The accountable person is the single individual who has the final authority and ownership over the outcome. They're the one who signs off on the decision, and they bear the organizational or even legal ownership if that outcome fails.
So they have the final say.
They have the final say, and that's the key differentiator. A core rule of the RCI matrix is that typically only one person can be designated as accountable for any given task.
Why is that so important?
Because we've all been on a project where 10 people think they're responsible. But when things go wrong, nobody is accountable.
The blame game starts.
The blame game starts. RUSI solves that by forcing that singular A. It prevents that paralyzing confusion of having multiple competing ultimate authorities during a crisis. If the patching fails and causes a massive outage, the accountable party is the one who faces the music, regardless of who is responsible for actually running the script.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the C in the I?
So, consulted C are the stakeholders or experts who provide opinions and advice before a decision is finalized. They help guide the task.
Like a security architect being consulted on a network change.
Perfect example. They have input, but they don't have the final say. And then informed I parties just need to be kept up to date on progress or results. They're not actively involved in the decision-making or the execution. Their role is passive.
So the whole point of RSEI is to make communication more efficient.
And to prevent overlaps, clarify who to escalate to. It's vital for a quick response during a security incident.
All right, moving from general task management, let's get more specific and look at roles related to data processing. This is where the privacy lens really comes into focus.
Absolutely. The regulatory landscape here, especially under GDPR, has made these roles very formal and very important. The sources highlight 3 distinct entities we have to know.
Let's start with the first one.
First, the data controller. This entity is the ultimate decision maker for the data. They are the ones who determine why the data is being collected and how it's going to be processed.
So like a bank that decides it needs customer transaction data to offer personalized financial services.
Exactly. The bank is the controller. They own the decision.
Okay, so then you have the data processor.
Correct. The processor is the one who handles the data on behalf of the controller. They have to strictly follow the controller's instructions.
So if that bank hires a third-party cloud provider to store and manage all their customer emails and transaction logs,
then that cloud provider is acting as the processor. They're managing the data physically, but they don't get to decide the purpose or the means of the processing. The bank still calls the shots.
and that leads us to a role the GDPR made mandatory for a lot of companies, the Data Protection Officer, or DPO.
Right. The DPO is a designated role, and it's mandatory for organizations whose main activities involve, say, large-scale, regular, and systematic monitoring of people.
Or if they process a lot of sensitive, special category data.
Exactly. The DPO's primary job is to monitor the company's internal compliance with regulations like GDPR. They're the key contact point for the supervisory authorities and, critically, for individuals who have privacy concerns or want to exercise their data rights. They make sure the governance structure is actually upholding the law.
Okay, so we've established the internal governance hierarchy, the policies, standards, procedures, and the roles that enforce them.
Right.
Now we have to connect that internal structure to the outside world. We need to talk about the frameworks that give us a recognized structure and the mandatory regulations that impose legal constraints and penalties.
And you really can't build a reliable security program from scratch. It's just not feasible. These standardized frameworks are essential for structure. They provide a recognized roadmap and a benchmark for managing security, making sure you cover all the necessary bases from a risk perspective.
So let's start with one that's seen huge global adoption, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or CSF.
A very popular one. The CSF provides guidelines for managing cybersecurity risk, and it's based on these core functions. Our sources detail the 5 core functions, plus a new foundational one.
Let's walk through them.
So the newest version of the NIST CSF added govern as the foundational function, which is exactly what we're talking about today. It highlights that security has to start with organizational decision-making.
It's the GRC component.
It is the GRC component. So after govern, the 5 functions that make up the complete life cycle are: 1, identify.
Which is understanding your risks, your assets, your data.
Right. Doing a comprehensive risk assessment. Then 2, protect. This is implementing safeguards, access control, training, encryption.
The actual defenses.
The defenses. 3 is detect. This is identifying when a cybersecurity event happens, so continuous monitoring, intrusion detection systems.
Okay.
4, respond. Developing and executing your strategy to contain the impact of an incident. That's your incident response plan in action.
And finally, number 5.
Recover. This is developing and executing activities to restore any assets and services that were impaired. So your business continuity and disaster recovery plans.
That's a really comprehensive approach to risk management. Now, by contrast, a lot of organizations pursue ISO 27001, often for, international recognition and market assurance.
Right. And ISO 27301 is a bit different. It's a formal international standard, and it's focused on the structure and the certification of an information security management system, an ISMS.
So it's about getting certified.
It is. Achieving that certification means you've established, implemented, maintained, and are continually improving a system to manage your security risks. It's a globally recognized statement that you've reached a certain level of security maturity.
So if I'm hearing this right, the difference is that NIST is more of a risk management guide,
Their roadmap, yeah.
whereas ISO is a framework for getting certified that you're managing risk systematically.
That's a great way to put it. The difference is subtle, but it's really crucial.
Okay, we also see organizations relying on COBIT. That one seems to take a slightly higher level view.
It does. COBIT is fantastic for establishing a GRC program because it focuses holistically on aligning IT governance directly with the broader business objectives.
So it's popular with auditors and senior management.
Very. They need that assurance that the IT investment is actually serving strategic goals, and COBIT helps provide that. It emphasizes continuous improvement.
And then on the operational efficiency side, often within IT service management, we find ITIL.
The Information Technology Infrastructure Library. ITIL is all about aligning IT services with business objectives and promoting continuous improvement.
So it's not purely a security framework.
Not purely, no. But its structured approach to things like change management and service operation is really easily adapted to cybersecurity operations. It helps ensure security practices are integrated smoothly into daily service delivery instead of being, bolted on as an afterthought.
Okay, so those frameworks give us excellent internal structure. But this next category, mandatory regulatory compliance, this is the one that carries the undeniable weight of the law.
And legal consequences and some very significant financial penalties. This is the non-negotiable stuff, and the landscape is incredibly complex, especially when you start crossing international borders.
We have to start with the titan of privacy law, GDPR.
The General Data Protection Regulation. It's an EU law, and it provides incredibly strong privacy protections for individuals inside the European Union. Its key tenets are all about transparent, informed consent, strong rights to data access, and of course the famous right to be forgotten.
And the penalties for not complying are steep.
They're incredibly steep. We're talking about fines that can reach up to 4% of a company's global annual revenue for serious noncompliance.
Which is why organizations now treat GDPR compliance as a major strategic risk.
It has to be. And crucially, GDPR classifies certain types of data like health information, genetic data, and very relevant to our discussion, biometric data as special category data.
Things like fingerprints and facial scans.
Exactly. And that classification mandates much stronger safeguards because this data is considered irreversible and permanent. You can change a password, but you can't change your fingerprint.
Now, looking beyond the EU, this pressure is global now. In the U.S., the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, has created a major regulatory shift.
It really has. CCPA grants California residents control over their personal data. It's a different approach from GDPR, but the goal is similar. It gives Californians the right to know what data is being collected about them, the right to request deletion, and critically, the right to opt out of the sale of their personal data.
And that influences any company that operates nationally in the U.S.
For sure. If you have customers in California, you have to comply.
And rounding out this global view, especially for companies dealing with Latin American markets, we have LGPD.
The Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados, which is Brazil's general data protection law. And just like GDPR, it applies to companies anywhere in the world that process data belonging to Brazilian citizens.
So an international company could find itself having to comply with GDPR, CCPA, and LGPD all at the same time.
All at the same time. And it depends entirely on where their data subjects, their customers, are physically located. It's a massive GRC challenge that demands meticulous mapping of data flows and storage locations.
Now, in addition to these big global privacy laws, we have mandatory sector-specific compliance requirements here in the U.S. and North America.
That's right. Starting with the federal government, we have FISMA, the Federal Information Security Management Act,
which applies to all federal agencies.
Every single one. It requires them to implement security programs to protect their information systems. And FISMA compliance often means adhering to the NIST framework, especially the NIST 800 series of publications.
And moving to the financial world for public companies, there's SOX.
Sarbanes-Oxley. It was enacted after those huge financial scandals in the early 2000s to ensure public companies maintain accurate and transparent financial records.
But it's not just a financial law, is it? It has big IT implications.
It has huge IT implications. It translates directly into mandatory IT governance controls, specifically around who can access financial systems, change management for software, and making sure the data is accurate.
And for any business that handles credit cards, we're back to PCI DSS.
Back to the payment card industry data security standard. It's non-negotiable for anyone who stores, processes, or transmits cardholder data. We talked about the 6 goals earlier. The standard basically forces the entire industry to maintain a baseline level of security maturity to protect that payment data.
And finally, a really critical one for keeping the lights on, NERC.
The North American Electric Reliability Corporation. Their standards are mandatory for utilities all across North America, the U.S., Canada, and parts of Mexico to ensure the reliability and security of the bulk power system.
And that's a different beast because it deals with operational technology, OT environments.
A completely different beast. In OT, availability has historically been more important than security. NERC forces security standards that are specifically designed for those industrial control systems.
This whole regulatory environment just underscores the immense risk of handling sensitive personal data. And the sources give us a really compelling case study of what happens when governance fails here.
Yeah.
The BioStar 2 breach from 2019.
That was a massive, massive failure of data governance. The breach exposed nearly 28 million biometric records.
Fingerprints, facial recognition data.
From customers across 83 different countries, and the data was just sitting on a publicly accessible server. The regulatory fallout under GDPR was, as you can imagine, severe.
And this case just perfectly illustrates that long-term, irreversible risk you mentioned with special category data.
It does. Because that data is permanent, the exposure creates a lifetime of privacy risk for those individuals. The organization's policies and procedures completely failed to classify and protect that biometric data with the kind of stringent safeguards that GDPR demands.
So the governance was missing that key operational step.
It was. They failed to properly classify and isolate those permanent identifiers, and it connects everything we've talked about. The regulation, GDPR, mandated a high level of protection, but the internal administrative controls, the procedures for database security just didn't meet that mandate. And the result was catastrophic exposure.
That case study leads us perfectly into our next segment, where we want to tackle some of these common confusions and global legal challenges that often trip up organizations when they're trying to manage GRC effectively.
Yeah, these are the common traps.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because we have these two terms, due diligence versus due care, that sound almost interchangeable, but they represent entirely different phases of risk management.
And confusing them can lead to massive legal exposure. This is a classic GRC trap that you have to avoid.
So let's define them. What is due diligence?
Due diligence is the investigation phase. It's the research you conduct before an event or a decision. It's all preparatory.
Like when a company is planning a merger or an acquisition.
A perfect example. Before they merge, they hire experts to perform due diligence. They check the target company's financials, their legal liabilities, and crucially for us, they thoroughly assess their security posture, their patch management history, their incident response readiness. You're actively seeking information to inform a big strategic decision.
Okay, so diligence is the research beforehand. So what is due care?
Due care is the ongoing implementation. It's the continuous action you take after the decision has been made to protect your assets. It reflects what a, quote, reasonable and prudent person would continuously do to prevent harm.
So this is the day-to-day work.
It's the day-to-day work dictated by your mandatory standards and procedures. It's the continuous action of patching servers within the required window, ensuring all employees get their annual security training, performing daily backups. It's the maintenance.
So diligence is the upfront research. Care is the ongoing operational commitment to maintenance.
Exactly. And both are legal imperatives. They're often used to determine negligence in a court of law, but they happen at fundamentally different stages of the process.
But hold on a minute. If due care is continuous maintenance, what happens if a reasonable person doesn't patch a system because that specific patch is known to break a critical production process?
That's an excellent question.
Does due care force you to make a bad business decision and take down a critical service?
No, and that's a great challenge that really pushes the limits of the definition. Due care doesn't mandate blind action. It mandates prudent action.
So what would a prudent person do in that scenario?
A prudent person would not knowingly crash a critical service. Instead, due care would mandate that you formally document a risk acceptance or a risk mitigation plan. You formally document the risk, the system is unpatched. You mitigate the exposure in other ways, like placing it behind an extra firewall or adding more monitoring, and you set a concrete date for addressing the root issue.
So the failure isn't the temporary delay in patching.
The failure is the absence of a documented, responsible plan of action. You have to govern the exception.
That makes the governance requirement much clearer. Okay, now let's look at the problem of global reach, the complexity of data sovereignty and jurisdiction. This challenge is just multiplying like crazy as data moves around the world.
It really is. Let's go back to that multinational company scenario. Imagine they're storing customer data in a data center in Paris, France, and also on a server farm in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
The challenge is data sovereignty. The organization has to comply with the local laws, the jurisdiction where the data physically resides.
So GDPR applies to the data in the French data center.
Right. And CCPA or other U.S. federal laws apply to the data sitting in Dallas.
So you could have two identical sets of records for the same customer, but they're governed by different, maybe even conflicting sets of rules just because of a geographic boundary.
That is exactly the problem. And it gets even more complex when that company needs to transfer the data. If they want to move the Parisian customer data to the Dallas server, that data transfer across the border requires specific legal mechanisms to stay compliant.
What kind of mechanisms?
They have to use things like SECs or standard contractual clauses. These are pre-approved legal contracts that basically guarantee that the U.S. recipient will protect that EU data to the same standard as GDPR. Without that legal framework in place, the transfer is illegal.
And the company's exposed to those massive GDPR fines.
Exactly. Jurisdiction is everything in global data governance.
Okay, beyond sovereignty, there are two critical legal imperatives that dictate how companies have to handle data when legal proceedings are on the horizon. Let's talk about legal hold and e-discovery.
So, a legal hold is the mandatory immediate preservation action. It gets triggered when a lawsuit is anticipated or is officially ongoing.
And what does it require?
It requires a company to preserve all data, digital and physical, that might be relevant to the case. It's an immediate stop on normal data lifecycle policies, like your automated deletion or data purging. You can't alter or delete anything that might be used as evidence.
And once that data is preserved under the legal hold, the formal investigation process begins. That's e-discovery.
E-discovery or electronic discovery. It's this intensive, legally mandated process. It involves identifying, collecting, preserving, reviewing, and ultimately producing all that electronically stored information, ESI, in response to the legal request.
So what's the crucial point here for a GRC program?
The crucial point is that your GRC program has to ensure your systems can handle this process efficiently. If your program doesn't mandate robust indexing and search capabilities, e-discovery can become ruinously expensive and incredibly slow.
Got it. Okay, finally, let's address a frequently overlooked area of risk management that ties GRC right back to engineering practices. Data governance beyond production, the staging risk.
This is a huge one. This oversight creates a massive vulnerability. So many organizations focus all their stringent protections, their encryption, their monitoring, their access controls on the live production environment where the real sensitive data is.
But they often forget that they have development, testing, and QA environments.
Right, and those environments are sometimes used by teams that are less security conscious. And they might still contain sensitive information because someone just copied the live production data over to test a new feature.
So this creates a mandate. Your data governance has to extend to all environments.
To all environments. You can't just trust that the data in your staging server is non-sensitive.
So what's the best practice for mitigating this staging risk?
The standard best practice is very clear. While production uses highly guarded live data, your development, testing, and QA environment should only be populated with masked, anonymized, or synthetic test data.
So it looks and feels like real data, but it isn't.
Exactly. The masked data has to mimic the structure and format of the production data so the testing actually works, but it can't carry the regulatory burden or the security risk of actual PII or health information or cardholder data. Using data masking tools is an investment, but it eliminates the risk of an unmonitored dev server accidentally exposing millions of customer records.
All right, so once you have the policies, the accountable people, the processes, and the legal framework all understood, how do you actually prove that you're in compliance?
That is the function of assurance. It's all about proving your security posture and maintaining continuous improvement through oversight.
And for this, we need to clearly distinguish between a few different mechanisms: audits versus assessments versus certifications.
They all serve distinct purposes, but they work together to give you a full picture of your security maturity. Let's start with audits.
Audits sound formal.
They are. They're formal, rigorous processes, often conducted by external certified third parties. And their specific goal is to verify compliance against a predefined mandatory metric.
So like a large retailer undergoing a PCI DSS audit, they're measuring their current state against those 6 security goals we talked about.
Exactly. And the result is typically a formal report, like an attestation of compliance that gets shared with regulators or clients.
Okay, so how are assessments different?
Assessments are usually broader evaluations. Their goal is more about corrective action or risk evaluation or just understanding your overall cybersecurity posture and readiness.
So an assessment is more future-looking, while an audit is kind of a rear-view mirror verification.
That's a really good way to put it. You might conduct an internal assessment before you migrate your systems to the cloud. That's a readiness check. You're trying to identify potential risks, like insecure APIs or configuration flaws, before they become exploitable.
So the goal is risk reduction, not just compliance verification.
Primarily, yes, though they certainly inform your compliance efforts. And then you have certifications like achieving ISO 27001 status or getting a SOC2 report. These are the formal documents that serve as proof of a certain level of security maturity for your partners and customers.
And going back to those policies, procedures, and standards, our source material reiterates that these administrative controls are really considered management tools.
They are, because their primary function is to regulate employee behavior and manage those inherent human and operational risks. They're the core mechanism for control.
And the ultimate administrative control for mitigating that human risk is awareness and training.
An essential part of any security program. It's all about educating employees on key threats like phishing, social engineering, and the organization's specific privacy practices.
And this has to be more than just a single boring annual video that everyone clicks through.
Oh, please. Management endorsement is absolutely necessary here to allocate resources for frequent, engaging updates. Things like simulating real-world phishing attacks. Employees need that constant, realistic exposure to threats to build a security-first culture where they're actively involved in detection, not just passively complying.
Okay, and finally, managing this incredibly complex web of overlapping rules, GDPR, CCPA, NURC, ISO 27001, that requires more than just spreadsheets, right?
And you'd be amazed how many companies still try. But no, you really need specialized GRC tools. Compliance tracking tools, in particular, provide a single source of truth for all your compliance data.
And that consolidation is vital.
It is. Trying to track all these overlapping requirements manually is just a recipe for human error, especially in a multinational company. By pulling data directly from your monitored systems like patch status from your endpoint tools or access logs from your identity management system, these GRC tools improve the accuracy of your compliance reporting and ensure the transparency that you need for external audits.
All right, let's try to bring this all together.
What we've really covered today is the foundational architecture of cybersecurity. GRC isn't just a filing cabinet full of paperwork, it's the administrative brain that sets the strategic direction for everything else.
We detailed how those high-level principles, the policies, get translated into measurable technical requirements, the standards, and then into executable actions, the procedures.
And we established how to create accountability with tools like the RACI matrix. We also navigated the mandatory demands of global regulators, especially highlighting the really complex implications of GDPR's classification of special category data like biometrics. This whole structure sets the essential why for all of your technical security controls.
And that complexity of navigating the global environment, it just can't be overstated. The idea of simultaneously managing compliance with GDPR for your European customers and CCPA for your Californians, while also dealing with data sovereignty, it demands meticulous operational and legal understanding.
All the way down to using specialized legal tools like SCCs just to transfer data.
Our deep dive today also touched on the high risks that come with new technologies and data governance. We specifically noted that an AI system trained on confidential health records presents a much higher risk of unintentional disclosure than other data sources.
It does.
And that realization leads us to a crucial and I think provocative question about the future of GRC.
In a world that's increasingly driven by AI and these massive, non-explainable or black box neural networks, how do organizations effectively mandate transparency and auditability requirements for these complex models to meet regulatory compliance?
Yeah, for example, a regulator needs to know why an AI made a certain decision about a customer's credit score. If the model is inherently opaque, our traditional GRC frameworks, which are focused on observable procedures, they just kind of break down.
They do.
And this forces us to focus on the controls we can still mandate. Beyond the transparency challenge, the key immediate governance steps that organizations should prioritize first to mitigate that risk of unintended data leakage from these AI systems.
Yeah.
They have to be operational.
Absolutely. The foundational governance steps, just as indicated in our source material, have to involve implementing strict administrative and technical access controls, and they have to mandate regular specialized audits of the AI model's activity. Security teams have to review and reconfigure the AI assistant's permissions to restrict its access to sensitive information before it ever gets deployed into a production environment.
So it's about proactive governance.
It is. That foundation of proactive governance is what prevents a catastrophic unintended disclosure when the underlying logic of the system can't be fully explained. It's something crucial to mull over as GRC evolves into the age of artificial intelligence.